All right, good afternoon, and we're going to get started here with the student portion of the OTS. So first of all, my name is Roger Lindgren, and I'm a professor at Oregon Tech, and have been associate director for about the last 8 years with OTREC, and this will be our last official OTREC hosting of the Oregon Transportation Summit. In each of the OTSs thus far, we've included some sort of a student spotlight, whether it would be poster session, student interaction, student presentations, and we're doing something a little bit interesting this year that's continuing our sponsorship of students, and it's called the 3-Minute Thesis, or 3MT. So some of you might be very familiar with this format, or you might be like me, and I found out about it a couple of weeks ago and just sort of learning about the format. So those of you that are experts in the area, bear with me as I have some introductory comments, some of which are sort of required by the University of Queensland, which actually holds the trademark on the words 3-Minute Thesis and 3MT. So if it says 3MT up there, I have to follow everything that the University of Queensland wants me to say. All right, so what is a 3-minute thesis competition? So it's an academic competition, as I said, developed by University of Queensland, starting in 2008, and apparently there were about 62 students that competed at that university in 2008. It's now grown to thousands of students at over 80 universities around the world. It is an opportunity for young researchers to share information about their work, but in somewhat of a low pressure, the students would probably disagree with that, but low pressure environment and in a relatively quick and pithy way. And so the 3 minutes was really devised by some professors down at the University of Queensland. They thought it was long enough if a person thought about just distilling their what they want to speak about to the core, the essence, what would really be attractive. I kind of view it as it's shorter than the traditional like 15 or 20 minutes that would be allowed at a technical conference. It's longer than your 45-second elevator talk when someone says, "What are you doing your graduate work on?" So it's in that sweet spot in the middle. It's long enough to explain what's going on, not so long that people that aren't experts in your field get bored. So we've got a wide variety of people here that are presenting, and of course today this is just transportation, generally planners and engineers, but 3MT goes the whole field of hard science, soft science. It's wonderful, and in fact Portland State will be hosting a statewide competition in spring of 2015. So look for advertising on that. It should be a wonderful opportunity. I do want to mention that by 3 minutes, it's not dumbing down or somehow making your research seem, just trite or irrelevant. That's not the point at all. The 3-minute was meant to help students get better at their presentation skills and get to the point, something that I should probably do. So at this point, I will try to stick to the point. So, with the rules. First of all, it's not limited to theses. So these can be dissertations, these can be theses, these can be graduate projects, or in fact, University of Queensland said anything that a graduate student wants to talk about. It could be a report for a course. So we're not restricted here to just theses. The presentations have to be spoken words, so no poetry, raps, or songs. And I'm reading raps directly from the script here. Now, this is planners and engineers, so I guess we don't have to worry about that. If there are music majors here, they'd probably think something different. While I'm talking about music, there's no sound or audio files allowed, so no backup singers, nothing like that to support the student presenters. You're going to see a single static PowerPoint slide. So once the student's name has been introduced, you'll see one slide. That's all they have. They can't have animations. They can't have spinning figures. They can't have multiple slides. No build effects, anything like that. The minute that the students start speaking, they'll have a few minutes or a few seconds to compose themselves up here. Once they start talking, John will time them on 3 minutes. So John, down here in the striped shirt, it's nice and bright, yeah. I think everyone, if I can see that, then I'm sure these bright-eyed students will be able to see that. We have a panel of expert judges with us today. We have Dina Plattman, who's a senior planning manager at DKS and Associates. Can you just sort of wave your hand there, Dina? Everyone can see you. Okay. And then we have Ted Leibold, Liebold, he's a transportation planning manager at Metro, and Margie Bradway, active transportation division manager. Is that right? Okay, good. At the Portland Bureau of Transportation. And so these experts are going to be judging the students in 3 basic criteria. There's communication style, basically answering this question: was the thesis topic and its significance communicated in a language appropriate to an intelligent but not specialist audience? Comprehension: did the presentation help the audience understand the research? And finally, engagement: did the oration make the audience want to know more? And in case you do want to know more, we're going to have a little bit of a question and answer period available while the judges are making their final decisions. So why do we need judges? Well, we need judges because we have prizes, and we have prizes because we have generous sponsors of those prizes. So first place will be a $250 cash prize. Somewhere down there's a large mock check that would be made out in your name. Then we'll give you a real one that you can take to the bank. There's the mock check. And that is graciously sponsored by ELTA Planning and Design. The first runner-up will have a $100 cash prize sponsored by NITSE, the National Institute for Transportation and Communities. And third place will be a $50 cash prize, also sponsored by NITSE. As I said, the judges will have just a few moments after each presentation to confer, and then they will spend a little bit of time after all 8 presenters have come up, and then we will make our final announcements, and the money will be awarded. So here's how things are going to work. There's going to be a slide on the screen showing the student's name and their affiliation. I will introduce them, essentially reading that information, and then the students will come up. They'll start talking. At 3 minutes, the bell. Want to try the bell there, John? See how that works? Everyone hear that? More importantly, do the students hear that? Yes. Okay. So that's the sign to stop talking. And essentially, I'll come up, introduce the next, and then we will have the judges. The judges will tell me each time that they're ready for the next presenter to begin. That way, they'll have just a few moments after each presentation. So do any of the students have any questions about the format? You understand where the time clock is going to be? Okay. All right. I think we're ready to get started. Everyone went really quiet. Okay, so this was randomly assigned, and I want to mention that we're really proud, actually, at OTREC that all 4 Oregon universities that are participate in OTREC are here with us today. So that includes Oregon State University, Portland State University, Oregon Tech, and the University of Oregon. So thank you to those schools and to the departments, and thank you to you students for having representation from all 4 campuses. We're just thrilled about that. So this was random. No, it wasn't random. You did it by alphabetical order. Yeah. So poor Dylan Anderson has probably had to go first at many things in his life because he has the name Anderson. Dylan is a student in the Department of Civil and Construction Engineering at Oregon State University. And his talk to us today is going to be Platform Edge Detection and Protection Effects on Platform Train Interface Safety. And thanks for all those hyphens that were done correctly. So. Good stuff.
All right. Okay, so I kind of simplified the title just a little bit here. And basically what, I guess essentially I'm looking at, is there a gap in rail transit platform safety? It's a little bit of a pun, I know it's bad, but it's actually what we're looking at here. You might remember this. This happened just about a month ago in Perth, Australia. If you didn't see it, it was covered widely on lots of news networks. This man here was walking along a platform, presumably on his phone. Actually, the video shows that he was on his phone, and tried to board the train right here, slipped through, and got stuck. So their solution, after many failed attempts of other things, was actually to bring everybody out of the train and push the train physically over to get this man out. This is actually not a very common solution or recommended solution. However, it worked in this case. He escaped with minor injuries, which was actually rather astounding based on what actually happened. So these type of injuries are known as platform train interface incidents. They're not the most common. The most common are slips, trips, and falls. However, they can often be the most severe. So basically this prompted the Transit Cooperative Research Program to come up with a project to improve platform train interface safety. Now we're looking at three main characteristics with this project: passenger characteristics, operational aspects, and technical aspects. My specific thesis is going to focus on the technical side of things and the way as engineers we can improve this platform train interface safety through design, whether it be through platform design, track design, or car design. Looking at the research we've done so far, we've conducted a literature review, we've looked at collecting actual incident data, which there's not a whole lot out there currently. We looked at doing interviews with all kinds of different stakeholders, whether it be consultants, transit agencies, platform builders, car designers, car builders, and actually also conducted 2 workshops. And the things we're finding so far is that there is no one problem that every transit agency is experiencing. And in fact, each transit agency in each mode has its own problems. Thus, there are no singular solutions that can go across the board. So we're looking at, like, currently compiling a list of what are the problems out there, and then also what can we do, what is currently being done to improve this safety, and what mode those are specifically associated with. So basically the final product that will come for this is a transit, or will be distributed by the Transit Cooperative Research Program, and it'll be a manual on platform train interface safety that in theory could be used by any transit agency in the world that has rail transit, and this will be a mode-specific solutions. So these transit agencies can apply these solutions based on the mode themselves and not just be given a single solution that can work on every rail transit application, because that simply is not true. So the basic goal is to improve this platform train interface safety regardless of mode, regardless of infrastructure, and regardless of country in the world, specifically focused in the United States. Thank you.
Now, John, what you didn't tell me was I was supposed to come up with like a joke or something to tell as the judges were working on the next one. So does anyone know any good transportation jokes? There was one last night at the dinner. I'm trying to remember it. And it wasn't off color. It was a nice joke, nice, clean. It was transportation related. Can't think of it now. And the judges are still scribbling. Sounds like they're ready. Okay. Our next presenter from Portland State University and the Department of Urban Studies is Joe Broach. Joe is going to be speaking on route quality and decisions to walk or bike.
Someone, somewhere in Portland, just ran out of coffee. Now put yourself in their shoes. You've got to get from point A, where you are, to point B, where the coffee is. Policymakers hope that you'll consider walking or biking for the trip, but that depends a lot on the quality of route that you expect to find between the 2 points. You can think of my research as a mathematical representation of thoughts like, that's a nice ride, I think I'll bike, or, ugh, that street is impossible to cross, I think I'll just drive. Now, we've known that route quality is important for these decisions for quite some time. That's why a lot of our policies are enacted to improve routes with things like bike facilities, with sidewalks, and with crossing enhancements. However, when it comes to predicting the impact of these policies, we're way behind. And here's why. We often only consider route quality along the shortest path between A and B, but we also know that that's not necessarily the path that pedestrians and cyclists are going to prefer, or the one that we're going to enact policies on. My own research using GPS data has shown, in fact, that the shortest path covers only about 1/3 on average of the routes people actually walk and cycle on. So, as an alternative, we can measure everything within a large area around point A and point B. But now we have the opposite problem. We're measuring a lot, but any specific change sort of gets buried in the noise of that big measurement. So, my research provides us with a third option. I used GPS data to observe the routes that cyclists and pedestrians actually choose. I then used that information to predict the most likely route that they would consider for a given trip. By measuring the route quality along that predicted route, we can get a better sense of how conducive a given area is for walking and biking for a specific trip. Now, here's the key to this new method. That is, as things are added to the area through policy, such as a new cycle track or a new crosswalk, the predicted route naturally shifts to account for it, unlike the other methods. This provides better information for those who are planning and making policies in the field of active travel, and hopefully it's going to provide you with better route options the next time you want to walk or bike for that next cup of coffee. Thanks.
All right, so you're starting to get the idea. It's incredible how much information can be shared when some thought is given to how to approach it in a short time period. While we have just a few moments as the judges are deliberating, I'll do a little bit of advertising here. So, as I mentioned, this is the last year that the Oregon Transportation Summit will be sponsored by sort of OTREC as we know it. That is a university transportation center consisting of the four member universities that Jennifer was speaking of at lunch. But we do have a new university transportation center that has some great Oregon involvement. For those of you that aren't familiar with NITSE, the National Institute for Transportation and Communities, its lead university is Portland State, once again, and then Oregon Tech, University of Oregon, University of Utah, and University of South Florida. And so look forward to a series of events for both practitioners, for students, and for researchers with NITSE. And in fact, students, several of you may have already received some scholarships through OTREC or NITSE, and one of the great things that we do is sponsor dissertation fellowships as well as undergraduate and graduate scholarships. So if you're not aware of those on your campus, please see your campus executive committee member for NITSE, and there will be a wonderful opportunity for you to support your research. All right, I talked long enough, great. All right, so our third presenter is Allison Duncan. Allison is here from Portland State University, the Department of Urban Studies, and she is going to be speaking on bicyclist perception and behavior at shared space junctions in England.
I'm a little short. I love bicycles. I'm a bike geek. I really love the freedom they give us, their efficiency, and quite honestly, their pure and simple beauty. But as we know, with the increasing number of cyclists and drivers on the road, there is increased risk of conflict and sometimes collisions. And needless to say, when the two collide, the bike rider is usually the one that loses. In 2012, more than 700 cyclists were killed in the U.S., and at least 50,000 injured in motor vehicle collisions across the country. There are many ways that we can modify our streets to make it better for riding. One cutting-edge technique that's currently being used in Europe sometimes is called shared space. Shared space is a traffic calming technique as well as a design concept with the aim of creating equal access and equal priority for all users. What makes these intersection designs unusual, though, is they actually remove elements. They remove things like traffic lanes, curbs, and signs, with the goal of making the road less road-like and more plaza-like. According to the concept, cyclists should therefore feel more free and equal when they're traveling through these spaces and behave accordingly. There has been very little research to date on how cyclists actually perceive and behave in these intersections. The majority of existing research has focused on pedestrians, especially those who are visually impaired. My research starts to fill that gap. So what I wanted to know was, how do cyclists actually perceive these intersections? How do they ride through these intersections? And how would they actually prefer to ride through these intersections if it's at all different? So focusing on 3 shared space intersections in England, or junctions as they call them there, I observed 6 intersections, 3 shared and 3 control in 3 cities with recognizable populations of cyclists. I observed how cyclists maneuvered and rode through these spaces and analyzed the paths they took. I wanted to know, do they ride in a more free manner as the concept would encourage? I then, to supplement my video observations, created surveys specific to each one of these intersections, asking the cyclists about the paths they chose, any paths that they would prefer if it was different, and of course, why. So after hours of observation, I found that cyclists did not demonstrate that increased freedom of movement. Instead, there was a split in the way that cyclists navigated these spaces, with a large percentage actually riding on the sidewalks and through the crosswalks, and the rest of the cyclists basically riding in a more vehicular cycling manner, following the paths of motor vehicles. In general, though, these shared space intersections do have a decreased crash risk overall. And interestingly, one thing I observed is that the busier the intersection, the better the yielding behavior of drivers. My dissertation can help provide further understanding of the relationship between bike riding and the intersection designs. Thank you.
I was serious about those transportation jokes, so if anyone has one, otherwise I'll have to start Canadian jokes. I'm Canadian, so I can tell Canadian jokes. And let's have a transit Canadian joke. How do you get 30 Canadians to get off the bus? You tell them, please get off the bus. How do you get a Canadian to have a sense of humor? Oh, no. That's a different one. Judges, thank you. You saved me. All right. Our next speaker is Lindsay McDonald. Lindsay is with the Civil Engineering Department at Oregon Tech, and her presentation is titled Asphalt Pavement Surface Rutting Mitigation in Klamath County with the Use of Chip Seals.
Klamath County is a pretty large county, and it's located in southern Oregon. It contains approximately 1,000 miles of county roads, which the Klamath County Roadway Department has to maintain. And these roadways tend to experience surface rutting due to freeze-thaw effects and studded tire wear. And like I said, the Klamath County Roadway Department has to maintain them. Historically, this has been funded by three main sources: federal funds, Oregon gas tax, and lastly, but definitely the largest portion, which has been about 90% of their overall revenue, the timber funds, or the federal forest receipts. However, in recent years, this funding has dramatically been cut back. And in 2008, Klamath County received almost $11 million just from the federal forest receipts alone. Next year, it's projected that they're only going to receive just over $250,000. And that's under 2.5% of what they've historically received. This begs the question, how is Klamath County going to continue to maintain their roadways, and how are they going to continue to mitigate the surface rutting that is so commonly experienced throughout the county? My graduate project, it proposes an alternative pavement surface rutting mitigation technique that uses chip seals to directly fill the ruts, which is cheaper than reconstruction and such as an asphalt overlay. This method would fill the ruts directly with chip seal mix, and this has been done in Klamath County this last year, and they surveyed it and found it to work just fine. This method would hopefully reduce overall reconstruction and help to lessen the financial burden that Klamath County and potentially other counties like it are facing today. Thank you.
Any jokes? No? Okay. Looks like Ted's ready to go. All right. They saved you. All right. Our next presenter is Alex Page. Alex is with the Department of Planning, Public Policy, and Management at the University of Oregon. And his presentation will be the role of cargo bicycles in disaster planning and emergency management.
Earthquakes are terrifying experiences. The ground is literally rupturing beneath you, and they can disrupt infrastructure like electricity and water supply. They can also destroy transportation networks like freeways and bridges. And while fear reigns during a disaster, human compassion and industriousness almost always prevail. Unfortunately, with the extreme top-down approach that we take to disaster management in this country, the worst of disaster victims is always presumed. And this is why emergency managers focus heavily on community preparedness. But the average citizen is sort of numb to that traditional messaging, like 72-hour kits. My research evaluated the effectiveness of a slightly different approach to community preparedness using active transportation. So the Disaster Relief Trials, or the DRT for short, is a grassroots community organized event that began here in Portland in 2012. And it has since spread to five other different cities. They're basically bicycle races with the backdrop of a post-disaster situation. Participants travel a course that simulates a disaster, and they simulate being disaster responders. They complete a series of checkpoints where along the way they have to accomplish tasks, maneuver over obstacles, carry heavy loads, and deliver precious medical supplies. The races are intended to demonstrate the resourcefulness of cargo bicycles in times of need. And because cargo bicycles have the capacity to move thousands of pounds of relief supplies by a team of riders in just a couple hours, they're very effective. Yet bicycles are never discussed in formal emergency management plans. What my investigation found was so much more than just a showcase for cargo bicycles. Of course, I did discover that cargo bicycles are effective in doing specific things that emergency managers want, like moving essential supplies, conducting damage assessment, creating communication links, providing first aid, and just getting around for personal transportation in the wake of a disaster. But DRTs also showed an expanded educational forum that really helped with community preparedness and the emergency manager's messaging. They also simulated a real disaster, which was a very beneficial training exercise for both disaster responders and the citizens that will experience them. So how does this help promote active transportation? Well, it essentially engages people in a new, exciting, fun, and practical way around active transportation. And it also helps abolish the notion that bikes are just toys, and they can provide a little bit more legitimacy as a mode of transportation and for being a resource during disaster. It's the model of these cooperative races that expands the awareness of active transportation. Thank you.
All right, so there's a cyclist, a pedestrian, and a transit rider sitting in a bar in southeast Portland. That's as far as I got. These talks are only 3 minutes long, so I couldn't write anything more, but if you can, I don't know that that's really a joke or just sort of what happens in Portland. Okay. Oh, and, sorry, and someone in a car at a red light. Okay. We're already. All right. And our sixth presenter from Oregon State University is Jasmine Pahukala. Jasmine is with the Department of Civil and Construction Engineering, and Jasmine's presentation is titled Effect of Time of Day on Injury Severity of Large Truck Crashes in Urban Areas.
All right. As my title says, my research focuses on the effect of time on the injury severity of large truck crashes in an urban setting. I used random parameters logit models to help me understand the different factors that contribute to these types of crashes. And for the model development, I used large truck crashes between 2006 and 2012 on urban freeways in Texas. And so why do we care about these types of crashes? Large trucks have a considerable impact on both society and the economy. In 2012, the Federal Highway Administration reported that large trucks accounted for 68% of freight tonnage in the U.S., and that percentage is expected to increase. And as this tonnage increases, so will the daily distribution of freight movements at all times of day, which has raised concerns in heavily populated urban areas where congestion is only getting worse. Past studies have looked at these kinds of crashes, but they represent time as an indicator variable. There's a complex interaction between the variables included in these types of regression models. For example, traffic patterns, driver behavior, and light conditions can vary throughout the day, so it's hard to decipher the true impact of time. So what I did was I first started out and developed a full model with all of the crashes, and then I went ahead and divided my data set into 5 time periods, as shown here on the slide, and developed 5 individual random parameter logit models and used transferability tests to compare them. And basically what these log likelihood ratio tests do is they compare the estimated parameters of the full model to the estimated parameters of the individual models to see if they're different. And in the end, we can conclude with 99% confidence that they were in fact different and that separate models by time of day are warranted. So that's exactly what I did. And these 5 tables here show my 5 models and all of the variables that were included in each time period. There's major differences in driver behavior, road geometry, and weather conditions. So it's further shows that we should be looking at crashes based on time periods. Hopefully these results can help decision makers and planners develop time-specific mitigation strategies to reduce the impact of these types of crashes. Thank you.
We've had 6 presenters and there's 2 remaining. Are you getting used to the format now? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I think the real dynamic nature of this would be when you could have a psychologist and then an engineering student and planning student and a history student, coming up rapidly after one another. So at the university-wide one in the spring, look for that real multidisciplinary nature. Although it's been really interesting to see all the different topics that have been covered even under the umbrella of transportation. All right, the judges are ready, and they're ready for Sam Thompson. Sam is from Portland State University, from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and Sam's talk is titled Cyclist Compliance at Signalized Intersections.
Awkward. Okay, so what is the behavior that gets people's goats the most? What cyclist behavior? The hint? Okay, obviously it's red light running because that's what I'm talking about. But people get really up in arms about cyclist red light running. And despite there being a lot of discourse much of it negative, on the topic, there are very few studies that actually quantify the amount of cyclists red light running, or, more importantly, talk about why cyclists do this very annoying behavior in the first place. And none of these studies have ever been done in the US. So this is where my thesis comes in. I have collected video of over 2,500 cyclists at red lights and also surveyed more than 150 cyclists about their attitudes towards red light running, in addition to any sort of justifications they might have for running red lights if they do, in fact, run red lights themselves. So why get all this data? Like, what can we do with it? So first we have to recognize that anyone not following traffic rules is obviously a problem. And so when you have a problem, the first thing you need to do is identify the scale of the problem. And so my thesis, first of all, documents the actual rates of bicyclist red light running in Oregon. And secondly, to solve a problem, you need to know the cause or the root of the problem. And so the second thing that my thesis does is thoroughly investigate the causes or the whys behind cyclist red light running. So what can we do with this information? So maybe there are certain types of cyclists that are more apt to run red lights, or maybe there are particular locations where it's more appealing for a cyclist to do so. And so my research will illuminate all of those things, and then we can take those and use them towards creating a solution. Enforcement of cyclists is kind of a hot issue right now, and so maybe we could use findings from my research to inform the best places for people to stake out and catch cyclists, make the enforcement efforts more efficient. Maybe that's not what we want to do. Maybe we want to change our infrastructure to physically impede people from running red lights. Or maybe we want to change signal timing to just make it less appealing. It's less of a good thing to run a red light for a cyclist. Or maybe we want to break the rules. I went to that session earlier, and it was pretty cool. And maybe we need to find locations where doesn't make a lot of sense for cyclists to stop necessarily. Change it up a little bit, have a policy change. And whatever the solution that we want to implement, I'll be providing the facts that go behind that solution. And to end it, I'll leave you with a fact. In my study, 90% of the cyclists did not run the red light. Thank you.
The judges are scrambling. John's coughing. And he hasn't been able to use his bell. Okay. No. It's been incredible adherence so far. I challenge any of you in the audience to, see if you can do this in 3 minutes and not go over. And that's all right. As judges are finalizing their tallying on Sam, we'll introduce our 8th presenter, Jennifer Warner. Jennifer is from the Department of Civil and Construction Engineering from Oregon State University, and she will be speaking on treatments for mitigating right hook crashes at signalized intersections with bicycle traffic.
Imagine you're a cyclist. Let's say, for example, this cyclist. You're pedaling down a busy street in the bike lane. As you approach a signalized intersection, you see that the car in front of you has just illuminated the right turn signal. The light ahead is still green. You continue to bike through the intersection. You think that the car sees you. That is until they turn right in front of you. The panic sets in. You don't have time to stop. You don't even have time to swerve. You are going to crash, and there's nothing you can do about it. Between the year 2007 and 2011, over 500 cyclists found themselves in this exact situation. This type of collision between a right-turning vehicle and an adjacent through-moving cyclist is called a right hook crash. And in that 5-year period, they represented over 18% of the total bicycle motor vehicle crashes in the state of Oregon, and a whopping 47% of the bicycle motor vehicle crashes at signalized intersections in the Portland metro area. However, even with these startling statistics, there's no clear understanding of which engineering solutions are the most effective in preventing these crashes from occurring. Because of this, ODOT is in search of a creative solution, and that's where I come in. My overall objective is to evaluate various engineering countermeasures to identify those that are the most effective in preventing these crashes from occurring. I'll be looking at pavement markings, signage, geometric designs, and ultimately, I am hoping to find the best solution. Over the next couple months, I'll be using the OSU driving simulator to design a simulated environment to test and compare the various countermeasures. I'll be using vehicle speed and trajectory feedback from the simulator, as well as that of the eye tracker technology that we have, to ultimately measure the effectiveness of those treatments. Additionally, to ensure that we'll be testing constructible designs, ODOT engineers will be engaged very early in the process. After all, our goal is to identify solutions that can actually be built on Oregon roadways. We want to provide ODOT decision makers with the guidance they need to make informed decisions about implementing right hook crash solutions. Ultimately, my hope is that the results of this study will provide engineering solutions that save the lives of many cyclists in the future, so that next time this cyclist doesn't have to find himself in the same dangerous situation. Thank you very much.
Wow, wasn't that incredible? 8 presenters, 3 minutes each, and I think everyone has learned something. Can we just have a round of applause for all of these brave folks here? It takes a lot of nerve to get up on a stage. They didn't know it was going to be in the ballroom and talk about their work. And so that is just wonderful to see, and it's great to see that we're continuing the tradition of producing some wonderful transportation professionals here in the state of Oregon. While the judges continue to do some deliberations, we have a few moments. If there's any questions that any of the audience members have for one of our presenters, remembering that they've just been through a very traumatic experience, so be easy on them. But if you have any questions, and I think we're small enough that you can call it out, but I can certainly bring the mic to you if you would like that. And the judges and John are going to go away and huddle and come back with some prizes, it sounds like. Any questions?
Well, I had a question for Sam. So when you were doing your research, were you just focused on intersections that were signalized, or were you looking at stop signs as well? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, no, I was not looking at stop signs. Like that's like a whole other game. Right. And the thesis would only be like 100 games. So yeah, so I did only look at cyclists that were at red lights, and they're all in Oregon also, and most of them are also in the Portland metropolitan area. And actually, many of them are also had bicycle signals. This is the data I used from a different study on bicycle signals that I
Oh yeah, I had a question of, is it Lindsay? I was curious of the longevity of some of those treatments. I mean, you see the rutting all over the state, and I was wondering, you see the picture up there. It looks like it's a very, not right now, but it looks like it's a very, like, oh, it's an obvious solution to it. I'm wondering if it weathers well, or if it starts to break apart at a greater rate than the rest of the surrounding pavement.
Testing. Well, honestly, the section, the test strips that the county did, and I wasn't able to find any research of historically done test strips or similar applications. So As far as I know, this was the only scenario where they'd actually directly filled with chip seal mix in the wheel ruts. And they tested it over a 6-month period of time between September and February, and during which studded tire season was in effect, which is a big deal, and they weren't able to find any changes. What they did was they had a the survey crew came out, and they set up 4 test strips, 4 different cross sections along the road, a mile-long stretch of roadway, and they surveyed at like 10 different spots across the road to see if any changes in elevation occurred, basically breakage or re-rutting, that sort of thing, and they didn't find any changes, any appreciable change. So does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. I was just curious. It seems like it's just an obvious solution, but I wonder how that performs over time.
Yeah, and I would definitely suggest that it needs to be a chip seal mix that is known to work in your area, because from what Klamath County has found, after I've talked with them, they've tried a lot of different mix designs, and the one that they use is specific and it works in their area. So it would definitely need to be a mix that is region by region or application basis.
Thanks.
A question or two. The first one is for Alex. And it's if you've encountered existing research on the use of cargo bikes in disasters in other regions, and or if there's information on how they've performed. So that's the first one, and I've got a question for Allison that I'll come back to if we have time. So.
There's not a whole lot of research out there about cargo bicycles specifically. There's some about bicycles, and because we don't really see a whole lot of disasters where bicycles are used in mass, you really look to a few examples that people have studied. So Japan has a lot of research about the 95 earthquake and even the Tohoku earthquake in 2011. But they don't focus on cargo bicycles. They're focusing on personal transportation. And there was one small study, now I'm saying that, there was one small study in Japan about the use of bicycles in general, and they do make recommendations that the larger cargo capacity bicycles should be used by governments, but they didn't actually attempt to use them in any sort of real-life disaster. So that's kind of the one big problem with this, is that it's untested.
And what kind of role did the bicycles play, if you remember, in the examples that you gave?
In Japan, they were used oftentimes for just getting home after work, because it was usually happening during the workday. There's stories, anecdotes that you can find all over the internet about people getting home after earthquakes, bicycle shops selling out. As you saw in some of the photos, those were the only passable ways to small communities, was going through a really rutted out debris zone. And so bicycles were kind of the best example. And there's one person that actually still lives in Japan who had experience with a cargo bike, sort of. It was mostly cargo on his back, but he was carrying large backpacks, and he was deployed by his company to deliver communication devices to different agencies in the 95 earthquake. So, not a whole lot of literature out there.
You had another question. Yeah, so for Allison, so given that you didn't see, it sounds like a lot of difference in the routes that cyclists took in these kind of uncontrolled areas, what is the next step in the research to kind of look at the impact that this is having on the way people bike, or if it is?
Well, I still haven't gotten all my survey results in, so I'm really curious to see what comes out from the surveys. Because what I did in the surveys is I actually physically drew the path options, and then I let people also choose the preferred path. So I'm really curious to see if anybody wants to do anything differently. I mean, one of the things that I observed is, basically, we have the way we sort of typically describe the 4 different types of cyclists here. You can sort of, and I didn't get into it, you can sort of tell the people who are doing the crosswalk riding and the sidewalk riding are more of the type that we would consider more of the very concerned, reluctant cyclists, right? And more of the fearless ones are the ones that were basically doing the vehicular cycling, because there's a shortage of bike infrastructure in England, which is part of the reason I chose it. So I think before I can even say for sure, I want to see what the survey says. But in general, these intersections are all actually shockingly successful. I went in really dubious about that. And so despite the fact that maybe the bikes aren't responding the way that, and basically the pedestrians didn't respond the way they were supposed to either, but they still have decreased crash rates, and they still slow down traffic, and they don't actually interfere with traffic flow. So on all of those counts, it's still pretty successful. Does that answer? Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
Any other questions?
Sure.
So when you talked about success and you're talking about reduced crashes, I mean, I think safety is the #1 priority.
Right.
But is there any way you can find out success about increasing numbers or
increasing
prioritizing
numbers of drivers or
of
cyclists?
cyclists and pedestrians on that route, or?
Well, that's not all of these cities have been keeping track of all of that. And one of the things what was interesting is I got to work really closely with each of the cities that I did my research in. And one of the cities is specifically, I had chosen a different intersection for my control, and the city came back to me, this is Coventry, and they said, no, we actually have this other intersection in mind that we'd like you to look at. It just got really loud. And because that one's actually going to be converted. So we'll have all of my pre-data, and then they can do post. And so we'll actually have a better idea with respect to that. That'll be really interesting to see what happens there. But in general, there hasn't been a lot of number counting with respect to that, so I could go back.
Sounds like a great funded research opportunity. Exactly. Okay, if there's no more questions, we'll just take a short break. Feel free to grab some tea or water, and then the judges will be with us to make the final announcements. After very, very serious deliberation, they have come to some decisions. So who's going to do?
I'm going to take the first one. So first of all, you guys were amazing, and I don't know that I could have done that as well as you did. So our third place winner goes to Joe Broach. So, come on up.
Picture time. So our second place winner, talking about cyclist compliance at signalized intersection, is Sam Thompson. Congratulations. There we go. All right. There we go.
Okay. And we just want to say that the votes were really close on a lot of these, very close. So these were tough decisions. So the number one check, $250 check goes to Jennifer Warner on right hook crashes. Congrats. Thanks, everyone.
And then I think we're just going to try to get one picture, if we could, of all the prize winners and the judges. Is that possible, Justin? To get one shot there? All right. Yeah. All right. Thanks again to our judges and to our student contestants. Again, it's a very daunting thing to do, and we're so pleased that they did it. Please consider making your presentations at the state competition in the spring. Thank you, everyone, for attending.